Imagine waking up as the punchline to a royal joke. You're an overweight Omega. You're exiled to a freezing tower. You're married to a cursed Alpha Emperor you've never met. So what do? You start cooking.
Hey, everyone. It's Phoebe. I want to share a bit about my writing process for today's story. When I sat down to draft this, I wanted to explore a very specific kind of strength. I wanted to focus on pure, stubborn survival through something as simple as cooking. The main character is dropped into a hostile environment. Everyone writes him off. I really loved writing his internal journey. He has to build his self-worth entirely from scratch. The core message that I want to share by writing this story is about how creating something with your own two hands can pull you out of a dark place. It is about finding warmth when the world tries to push you out. I hope you connect with his journey. If you want more stories like these, please check out my shop for my full audiobooks collection. Grab a warm drink, and let's start.
Chapter 1: The Cold Spire Tags. The cold woke me first. It seeped through the thin mattress, settled deep into my bones. I tried to sit up. My body refused. I felt incredibly heavy. My limbs were sluggish. My lungs burned for air. The room smelled like stale dust and old stone. There was no warmth, no pack scent at all. I blinked against the dim light. This was not my studio apartment. It wasn't the chaos of my restaurant's prep kitchen. Massive blocks of gray stone surrounded me. Frost clung to the ceiling. A pathetic fire smoldered in the hearth. Then the memories hit. They crashed into my brain. I groaned. I clutched my head. Images flashed behind my eyes. A terrifying throne room. A proxy wedding to an alpha I had never met. Sneering nobles. Look at him. The pig of the north. A fitting bride for our cursed emperor. He will rot in the winter spire. I squeezed my eyes shut. Two different lives collided in my head. I was a sous chef. I slipped on a wet floor and died. But I also remembered this body's life. The original Omega Arthur collapsed from the sheer cold right after his proxy wedding. My soul woke up in his place. I inherited his memories. Now I am the newly wedded, immediately discarded consort to the Alpha Emperor Veilrim. My scent glands throbbed with distress. My inner Omega whimpered at the sudden, sharp rejection.
I rolled over.
I pushed up to a sitting position, took real effort. My center of gravity was wrong. I swung my legs over the drafty bed. My bare feet hit freezing stone. I needed a mirror. I spotted a tarnished glass against the wall. I walked toward it. My steps echoed. I wiped dust from the surface. I stared at the reflection. My breath hitched. I did not look like myself. I was soft. I was wide. My face was round. A thick layer of fat padded my jawline. My fingers were plump. My stomach rested heavily over my thin linen trousers. A harsh wave of insecurity washed over me. The air grew thick with my own distressed scent. It smelled like sour milk and wilted herbs. In my past life, I was athletic. I commanded a kitchen brigade. Here I was a joke, a political insult wrapped in flesh. The rival faction sent me on purpose. An overweight, timid Omega. They wanted to mock the Emperor. They wanted to ensure he never formed a powerful mating bond. I hugged my soft stomach. A stinging prickle hit my eyes. I was utterly alone, trapped in this freezing stone tower, the Winter Spire, a place for forgotten things. I stood there for a long time. The cold bit into my skin. I let the deep, aching insecurity settle. Then my stomach growled. The sound broke the spell. I wiped my eyes. I took a deep breath. Fine. I was in a new body. I was a pawn, but I was still a chef. I refused to freeze. I refused to starve. I rummaged through a heavy wardrobe. I found a thin undershirt and a thick, scratchy woolen tunic. Pulled them on. I rolled the sleeves up. Felt like putting on my chef's whites. I squared my shoulders. I stepped out of the bedroom. The spire was a maze of dusty corridors. The silence was heavy. I saw no guards or servants. Someone must have dropped the tray and run. I never even heard their footsteps. Eventually, I stumbled upon a small antechamber. A wooden tray sat on a stool. My daily ration. I inspected the food. My professional pride flared into anger. A block of hard, gray bread, a hunk of waxy cheese, a bowl of watery, unseasoned gruel, an insult to food itself. I grabbed the tray. I was not eating this garbage. I needed a kitchen. I explored the lower levels. The air grew damper. Finally, I pushed open a heavy oak door. The hinges screamed. I stepped inside. I smiled. It was an old, abandoned secondary kitchen, out of use for decades. Cobwebs hung from ceiling beams. Dust coated everything. But the bones were magnificent. A massive stone hearth, heavy iron pots, a scarred wooden prep table. It was perfect. It was a sanctuary. I set the sad tray down. I went to work. I found a twig broom. I swept the floors. I wiped down the prep table. The physical labor felt good. It warmed my heavy body. It gave my anxious omega mind a focus. I turned to the hearth. I found dry firewood. I used a rusty flint and steel to spark a flame. Soon, a cheerful fire crackled. The kitchen filled with a warm, orange glow. I looked at my rations. Time to transform them. I scoured the dusty pantry. I found a small miracle. An abandoned crate held a few frostbitten root vegetables left behind by careless guards. A single dried-out knob of garlic. A sealed clay jar of coarse salt. It was the absolute bottom of the barrel, but it was enough. I filled a heavy iron pot with fresh water. I swung it over the fire. I grabbed a dull knife. I spent 10 minutes sharpening it. I chopped the gray bread into cubes. I tossed them in a dry pan to toast. I peeled the sad roots. I minced the garlic. I threw the watery gruel out the window. I started fresh. I boiled the vegetables until soft. I mashed them into the water. I added a heavy pinch of salt. I dropped in the garlic. The aroma hit the air. Smelled real. My scent started to sweeten just a little. Roasted hazelnuts and warm bread. I shaved the waxy cheese into thin strips. I dropped it into the hot broth. It melted slowly. It turned the water into a rich, cloudy soup. I tossed the toasted bread cubes on top. I grabbed a wooden spoon. I took a bite. The soup was hot. The garlic cut through the cheese. The toasted bread added a perfect crunch. A simple peasant meal. Right now, it tasted like absolute victory. I ate in silence. The warmth spread to my toes. I looked at my soft hands. I was a discarded omega, trapped in an unfamiliar body. But I had my mind. I had my skills. The Alpha Emperor could ignore me. The nobles could laugh at my weight. It still stung deeply. But in this kitchen, I was in control. I would survive. I finished the bowl. Tomorrow, I would explore outside. I needed better ingredients. I needed to see what else this winter spire hid. Chapter 2: Garlic, Ash, and Midnight Scales. I woke up shivering. The stone room was freezing, but my mind held onto yesterday's victory. My scent wasn't entirely sour today. It held a faint trace of roasted hazelnuts beneath the anxiety. I pushed myself out of bed. My joints ached. This body was heavy and soft, but it had successfully fed me. I refused to wallow. I needed to keep moving. More importantly, I needed real ingredients. I wrapped my thick tunic tightly around my waist. I stepped out into the freezing corridors of the Winter Spire. I spent hours exploring the lower levels. The place was a tomb. It was built to keep me isolated. Vale Rim and his court really wanted me to rot quietly. But then, I found a heavy wooden door at the end of a long hallway. I leaned my full body weight against it. The rusted hinges screamed. The door popped open. Warm, damp air rushed over my face. It was a glass house. It was massive and completely overgrown. The glass panels on the roof were thick with dirt. Vines crawled up the stone walls. It was a chaotic jungle. My heart skipped a beat. This was my pantry. I waded into the greenery. My soft boots sank into the damp soil. I found wild tomatoes heavy on the vine. I dug up knobby, beautiful root vegetables. I found a massive patch of wild garlic and bushy thyme. I gathered everything up in the hem of my tunic. My scent instantly started to sweeten. The sour anxiety faded into a warm, toasted hazelnut aroma. I carried my loot back to the kitchen. I spent the afternoon prepping. I made a rustic flatbread dough using some old flour I found in a barrel. I roasted the tomatoes until they blistered. I mashed them with the wild garlic. I baked the flatbread directly on the hot hearthstones. Just as I pulled the hot, crusty bread from the fire, I heard footsteps. I grabbed my dull knife. I spun around. A young beta boy stood in the doorway. He dropped a wooden tray in shock. The daily rations spilled across the floor. "You're baking?" he stammered. He stared at me with wide eyes. The smell of roasted wild garlic and hot dough filled the entire stone hallway. "I'm surviving," I shot back. I lowered the knife. "What's your name?" "Elias, my lord." He couldn't stop staring at the flatbread. The smell of roasted garlic and fresh dough was intoxicating. "Skip the titles, Elias. I'm just Arthur." I tore off a massive piece of the hot bread. I held it out to him. "Trade with me." Elias hesitated, but he was a young, overworked servant. The temptation was too much. He took the bread. He took a massive bite. His eyes rolled back in his head. "Holy Mother," he mumbled through a mouthful. "Tomorrow I want a cut of raw meat," I told him. "Mutton, beef, venison, whatever the butcher throws away. Bring it to me. I'll give you a fresh meal every day." Elias swallowed hard. He nodded frantically. We had a deal. He kept his word. The next evening, Elias sneaked a massive, cheap cut of bone-in mutton into my kitchen. It was tough and full of gristle. To me, it was pure gold. I'd spent the morning in the damp, tropical heat of the glasshouse, harvesting the last of the wild onions and enough rosemary to scent a cathedral. Elias provided the protein, but the glasshouse provided the profile. I wasn't just a cook. I was an urban forager in a stone tower. I stayed up late that night. I rubbed the mutton down with coarse salt, crushed peppercorns, and handfuls of chopped thyme. I slow roasted it over the open fire. The fat rendered beautifully. The meat grew tender. The rich, savory smell filled the entire stone tower. It was past midnight when the temperature suddenly dropped. The fire in the hearth flickered wildly. The shadows stretched across the walls. A terrible, heavy pressure filled the air. My omega instincts flared instantly. It was the presence of a massive, distressed alpha. But the scent was wrong. It didn't smell like a man. It smelled like scorched earth, sharp brimstone, and bitter ash. Something huge landed in the courtyard outside my window. The entire spire shook. I froze. I clutched the edge of the wooden prep table. I forced myself to walk to the narrow, arched window. I peered out into the darkness. A monster crouched in the snow. It was a dragon. Its scales were the color of midnight. Thick smoke curled from its jagged maw. It was easily the size of a small keep. It thrashed its massive tail against the stone walls. The beast was wild, clawed at the frozen ground. Its red eyes were wide and unfocused. It was starving. It was out of its mind with pain. I didn't understand then that a dragon's hunger isn't for calories. It starves for the essence of its true mate. Regular food turned to ash in its mouth. My meals actually satisfied the beast because my hands prepared them. My heart pounded against my ribs. Logic told me to hide. Logic told me to lock the kitchen door and pray. But my instincts screamed something else. That was an alpha in deep, agonizing distress. The dragon snapped its jaws at the empty air. It roared. The sound vibrated right through my bones. I didn't think. I acted. I grabbed a thick rag. I pulled the heavy iron roasting pan from the fire. The spiced mutton sizzled in its own juices. I shoved the window open as wide as it would go. "Hey!" I yelled. My voice cracked. The massive beast snapped its head toward me. Its glowing red eyes locked onto mine. Smoke billowed from its nostrils. It bared teeth the size of daggers. My hands shook. I lifted the heavy roast by the bone. I threw the meat out the window. It landed in the snow with a heavy thud. The dragon lunged. It devoured the entire roast in one massive bite, bone and all. I slammed the window shut. I backed away, pressing myself against the far wall. I waited for the beast to smash through the stone and eat me next. But it didn't. Outside, the frantic thrashing stopped. The heavy, bitter scent of ash slowly began to shift. It mellowed into something richer. It smelled like warm wood smoke and crushed black pepper. The spices from the meat were working. The food was grounding it. I crept back to the window. I peeked over the stone ledge. The dragon was sitting still. The wild frenzy was gone from its eyes. It lowered its massive head to peer at my window. It let out a deep, chest-rattling rumble of approval. It was a terrifying, beautiful sound. Then, with a powerful sweep of its dark wings, it launched into the night sky. I slid down the wall until I hit the floor. I let out a shaky breath. My heavy body trembled. I wrapped my arms around my knees. I just fed a monster. And for the first time since waking up in this freezing tower, I didn't feel completely useless. Chapter 3: Wood Smoke and Meat Pies. It became a routine. Every midnight, the massive shadow dragon returned. I stopped being terrified of the beast. Well, mostly. It was still huge. Still smelled like sharp ash and danger. But it always waited. It sat patiently in the snowy courtyard. It watched my narrow window with glowing red eyes. I threw out whatever I had managed to cook. Mutton ribs, spiced pork shoulders, stale bread soaked in rich bone broth. The dragon devoured it all. Eventually, I started talking to it. I didn't know why. Maybe I was just lonely. Maybe the isolation of the winter spire was finally cracking my sanity. "He hasn't even sent a letter," I told the beast one night. The wind was biting cold. I shivered by the open window. I tossed a heavily seasoned venison shank into the snow. The dragon caught it in midair. His massive jaws snapped shut. It made a deep, vibrating rumble deep in its chest. "Not that I blame him," I muttered. I leaned against the cold stone sill. I looked down at my thick waist. I gripped the soft, heavy flesh of my stomach. My inner Omega whimpered. The insecurity was a heavy anchor. The nobles sent him a joke. A fat, useless Omega. They wanted to humiliate him. I would ignore me, too. The dragon stopped chewing. His massive head snapped up. Those glowing eyes locked directly onto mine. A puff of dark smoke curled from its nostrils. It let out a sharp, angry hiss. "Don't look at me like that," I sighed. I rubbed my tired eyes. "It is the truth. Look at me. I am no one's dream consort." The beast stepped closer. Its massive claws crunched in the frozen snow. It nudged the stone wall right beneath my window. A heavy wave of alpha scent washed over me. It wasn't aggressive. It was surprisingly comforting. It smelled heavily of wood smoke and crushed black pepper. My own scent sweetened in response. The sour notes of anxiety faded into warm, roasted hazelnuts. The dragon gave another long, vibrating rumble. Then, it spread its dark wings and flew into the night. The next afternoon, the kitchen was blissfully warm. I was making meat pies. Elias had managed to trade for a sack of decent flour and a block of good butter. I rolled out the dough on the scarred wooden table. My sleeves were pushed high up my thick arms. My face was flushed from the hearth fire. A shadow suddenly fell across the doorway. I froze. My inner Omega spiked with sudden, intense alertness. An alpha was in the room. A very strong, dominant alpha. I turned around slowly. I gripped my wooden rolling pin like a club. He was huge. He had to duck to enter the kitchen frame. He wore standard castle guard armor. The leather was battered and worn. His face was rugged and handsome in a harsh way. A pale, jagged scar cut across his left eyebrow. His eyes were dark and completely exhausted. He smelled incredible. Wood smoke and black pepper.it was exactly like the night air after the dragon left. I assumed he worked the night watch by the outer fire pits. The beast landed there every night, so it made sense Val would carry the monster's lingering scent on his clothes. The scent wrapped around me. My knees felt a little weak. "Smells good," he said. His voice was rough and deep. It sent a sudden shiver down my spine. "Who are you?" I asked. I held the rolling pin tighter. My knuckles turned white. "Val," he grunted. He stepped inside. He leaned casually against the stone wall. He didn't look threatening. He just looked incredibly tired. "I patrol the outer wall. Elias mentioned a chef hiding in the spire." I didn't believe him. "Palace rumor says the Emperor is in isolation," Val said. He looked toward the main keep. Some winter fever. The High Council handles the petitions now. No one has seen him in weeks. Rumors say the Northern Legions are restless, Val added, his voice dropping to a low growl. They're camped just beyond the Frost Pass. They aren't loyal to the Council. As for the Emperor, the barracks whisper that it isn't a winter fever at all. The inner circle is terrified of something. To the common soldier, the Emperor is just a sick man. To the inner circle, he is a ticking time bomb. They've spent years making sure no one outside those walls ever sees the Shadow Beast. If the public knew their leader was a monster, the Empire would tear itself apart. I paused. Val seemed remarkably well-informed for someone who patrolled the outer walls. It was a lot of detail for a guard. But then again, gossip was the only currency in a place this lonely. I pushed the suspicion aside. I had a mutton pie to finish. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. I wiped my floury hands on my apron. Well, he wasn't lying. I am Arthur, the exiled consort, Val said softly. I flinched. The title always stung. My scent soured slightly. I looked down at my heavy body. I crossed my arms over my chest. I tried to hide my wide hips and soft stomach. It was a defensive reflex. Yes, the joke of the court. Are you here to laugh at the fat Omega?
Val Frovned.
His dark eyes narrowed. He pushed off the wall. He took a slow, deliberate step forward. I don't see a joke. His gaze swept over me. It wasn't a mocking look. It wasn't a look of pity either. It was slow. It was heavy. He looked at my flushed cheeks. He looked at my thick thighs. He looked at my soft stomach. His pupils dilated. The alpha scent in the room spiked. It grew thick and intensely possessive. My breath hitched. My inner Omega practically purred. No one had ever looked at me like that. Not in my old life. Definitely not in this one. He looked at me like I was a feast. You look.
Val paused.
He cleared his throat. He seemed to be struggling for words. You look capable. You look warm. It was a clumsy compliment, but the raw honesty in his voice made my chest ache. I am baking meat pies, I said. My voice trembled a little. I turned back to the table. I needed to look away from his intense stare. They need 20 minutes in the coals. I can wait, Val said. He sat heavily on a wooden stool near the hearth. He didn't take his eyes off me. I went back to rolling the dough. My hands were shaking. I was acutely aware of his gaze. Every time I stretched for the flour, I felt his eyes track my movements. When I bent over to check the fire, the weight of his stare felt like a physical touch. It made my skin burn. When the pies were finally done, I set a hot one in front of him. The crust was golden and flaky. Rich, savory gravy bubbled at the edges. Val took a massive bite. He closed his eyes. A low, appreciative groan vibrated in his throat. It sounded entirely indecent. My face burned even hotter. This is incredible, he said. He looked up at me in awe. You made this from scraps? Castle food turns to ash in my mouth, Val muttered. He stared at the empty plate. The curse. Whatever afflicts the Emperor, it burns through his soul and the beasts alike, Val muttered. I've seen it. He starves with a full stomach because the dragon within him can only be fed by a true mate's hand. Nothing else actually satisfies the hunger. The old texts swear the curse only breaks with a mate's absolute, unconditional acceptance. Until this. I make do with what I have, I said softly. The Emperor is a blind fool, Val muttered. He took another huge bite. Leaving you in this freezing tower. He has no idea what he threw away. I stared at him in shock. A lowly guard insulting the Alpha Emperor? That was treason. It was incredibly dangerous. But my heart skipped a beat anyway. Val finished the pie in record time. He stood up. He looked much larger when he stood this close to me. I will be back tomorrow, Val said. It wasn't a question. It was a promise. I might not have food, I argued weakly. I wiped my hands on my apron again. I do not care about the food, he replied. He held my gaze for a long, heavy second. His scent washed over me again. Protective. Warm. overwhelming. I will see you tomorrow, Arthur. He turned and walked out the heavy oak door. I stood alone in the quiet kitchen. My Omega instincts were doing frantic backflips. I pressed a flowery hand to my hot cheek. This was bad. This was very bad. I was a married consort. I was a political exile. But a brooding, scarred guard had just looked at me with pure desire. And heaven help me, I wanted to feed him every single day. Chapter 4. Spiced Apples and Stolen Glances. Weeks did not just pass. They built a bridge. We fell into a rhythm. One evening, the hearth fire died. I was freezing. I dropped a heavy iron pan, crushed my toe. Val ducked into the kitchen right then. He did not mock my clumsiness. He knelt on the cold stone. He carefully wrapped my foot in a clean rag. His rough hands were incredibly gentle. He brought extra firewood the next night. He built the fire up himself. He stayed until the room was completely warm. He looked at me like I was precious. The heavy isolation of the tower finally broke. I started counting the hours until his patrol. The winter spire was no longer just a stone prison. It was my home. I stood at the scarred prep table. I needed a sweet, sticky dough. Elias had brought me bruised apples the day before. I chopped them thick. I tossed them with coarse sugar and winter spices. The kitchen was blissfully warm. My scent was entirely calm. The rich aroma of roasted hazelnuts filled the air. It overpowered the cold draft leaking from the hallway. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor. My inner Omega immediately perked up. My pulse did a familiar, traitorous little jump. Val ducked through the doorway. He shook snow from his dark leather cloak. He looked exhausted as always, but his dark eyes instantly locked onto me. The exhaustion seemed to melt away. "Apple tarts today," I said. I wiped my hands on my apron. My cheeks felt hot.
Val stepped closer.
His wood smoke and black pepper scent wrapped around me. It was heavy and intensely protective. It made my knees feel a little weak. He stopped right beside me. He was so close I could feel the heat radiating off his armor. He reached out. His large, calloused hand brushed my cheek. "You have flour right here," he murmured. His rough thumb swept across my skin. The touch sent a jolt of electricity straight to my toes. I stopped breathing for a second. I looked up at him. The jagged scar over his eye caught the firelight. He was staring directly at my lips. His pupils were blown wide. I stepped back. My hips hit the heavy wooden table. I crossed my arms over my soft stomach. I tried to build a physical barrier. "Val, we can't." My voice trembled. "Why?" he asked. He didn't step back. He invaded my space. Felt entirely right. My Omega instincts screamed at me to bare my neck to him. "I am married." The words tasted like ash in my mouth. "I am the Emperor's consort. If anyone sees us, they will execute you. They will execute me." Val's jaw tightened. The scar pulled taut across his brow. "The Emperor abandoned you. He locked you in this freezing tower. He doesn't touch you. He doesn't even know you. It doesn't matter. It is treason." I looked down at my plump fingers. "Besides, look at me, Val. I am a political joke. I am just a fat Omega hidden away to save the Emperor from embarrassment. You shouldn't risk your life for this." Val let out a rough, angry growl. He closed the tiny distance between us. He grabbed my wrists gently. He pulled my arms away from my stomach. He refused to let me hide my body. "You are beautiful." His voice was absolute. There was no hesitation. "You are soft and you are strong. You feed me. You feed this whole damn spire. The Emperor is a blind fool. I would burn the capital to the ground for you." Tears pricked my eyes. No one had ever spoken to me like that. Not in my old life. Not in this one. I desperately wanted to believe him. I wanted to lean into his broad, armored chest. But the guilt was a heavy iron chain. I pulled my hands away. I turned my back to him. I grabbed the bowl of apples. "Please, Val, just sit down. I will bring you a tart when they are ready." Val did not push. He sat heavily on the wooden stool. The silence between us was loud. It was thick with unspoken things. He ate the tart in silence. He left quietly. My heart physically ached when he walked out the door. Midnight came quickly. The temperature plummeted. The massive shadow dragon landed in the courtyard. Snow swirled wildly around its dark scales. Its glowing red eyes fixed on my narrow window. It waited. I tossed a heavy chunk of roasted pork belly into the snow. The beast snapped it up instantly. The sharp, bitter scent of ash mellowed into warm wood smoke. It was the exact same scent Val carried. But I didn't connect the dots. I was too wrapped up in my own miserable thoughts. I leaned against the freezing stone sill. I pulled my thick woolen tunic tighter around my waist. I am in deep trouble, I whispered to the monster. The dragon tilted its massive head. A puff of dark smoke escaped its jaws. It listened. There is a guard. His name is Vel. I confessed to the empty night. He looks at me like I am a prize. He doesn't care that I am heavy. He doesn't care that I am a discarded exile. The beast stepped closer. His sharp claws gouged the frozen earth. It let out a deep, vibrating rumble in its chest. The sound was incredibly possessive. The heavy alpha scent spiked in the cold air. A single tear slipped down my cheek. I wiped it away quickly. I think I am falling in love with him, but I can't. I am bound to the Emperor. Even if the Emperor is a cruel tyrant who hates me, I cannot be a traitor. The dragon froze completely.
Just taking a quick pause from the story. If you enjoy this setup, you should check out my shop. I have a whole collection of viral transmigration and Omegaverse audiobooks waiting for you. You can dive into complete, full-length stories right now. Your support directly funds this channel. It gives me the time to write more of these worlds for you. The link is in the description below.
Its glowing red eyes widened. It let out a sudden, pained sound. It wasn't a roar. It sounded like a wounded, desperate animal. A heavy wave of pure distress flooded the courtyard. The beast backed away quickly. It stumbled in the snow. It looked up at me one last time. Its eyes were filled with an ancient, unbearable grief. Then, it launched itself violently into the dark sky. I watched it disappear into the clouds. I rubbed my chest. My heart felt completely bruised. I was trapped. I was caught between a ghost of a husband, a midnight monster, and a scarred guard who made me feel perfectly whole. Chapter 5: The Signet Ring Tags. The kitchen was stiflingly hot. Rain lashed against the narrow windows of the winter spire. The storm outside matched the nervous energy bubbling in my chest. I stood at the wooden prep table. I stirred a massive iron pot of beef and barley stew. The rich, savory aroma filled the room. The barley was a gift from Elias's latest trade. But the deep, earthy sweetness of the broth came from the root vegetables I dug out of the glasshouse mud earlier that afternoon. My secret pantry was thinning out as the frost worsened, but it was still holding on. It mixed perfectly with my own scent. I smelled like toasted hazelnuts and warm sugar. I was happy. I was waiting for him. Heavy boots sounded in the corridor. Val stepped into the kitchen. He was soaked. Rain dripped from his dark hair. He looked exhausted and intensely frustrated. He unclasped his heavy leather cloak. He unbuckled his heavy chest piece and dropped the armor over a wooden chair near the hearth. He wore only a simple, damp linen shirt beneath it. The wet fabric clung to his broad chest. My breath hitched. My inner Omega did a joyful little flip. "Rough patrol?" I asked softly. I handed him a dry rag. Val took it. He dried his face. He didn't look at the stew. He looked entirely at me. His dark eyes were burning. His scent filled the room. Wood smoke and crushed black pepper. It was thick. It was completely overwhelming. It wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. He tossed the rag aside. He closed the distance between us in 2 long strides. "Val?" I whispered. My back hit the edge of the prep table. He didn't stop. He stepped directly into my space. He planted his large hands on the table on either side of my hips. He trapped me. It didn't feel scary. Felt entirely right. I tilted my head up. His chest brushed against mine. "I cannot do this anymore, Arthur," he said. His voice vibrated deep in his chest. "I cannot just stand here and eat your food. I cannot leave every day. You have to." I breathed. My heart hammered against my ribs. The Emperor. Forget the Emperor, Val growled. He lifted a hand. His rough, calloused fingers cupped my jaw. His thumb traced the soft line of my cheek. He is a fool. He is a coward. But I am right here. I melted into his touch. I closed my eyes. He stroked my skin. He leaned down. His face was inches from mine. I could feel his warm breath on my lips. My Omega instinct screamed to close the gap. I wanted him to claim me. I wanted to forget the stone tower. I wanted to forget my political exile. Just as his lips brushed mine, a sharp sound shattered the moment. The heavy iron warning bells of the main castle rang out. The sound was deafening. Valerim froze. He tilted his head, counting the chimes. 3 long, 2 short, he hissed. That's not a fire. That's the signal. My northern vanguard has breached the outer markers. The council must have panicked and called for a full lockdown. They've made their move earlier than expected.
Val froze.
He cursed under his breath. The intense, romantic haze vanished. He stepped back. He looked completely torn. I have to go, he said. His voice was tense. The duty of a soldier took over. Arthur, stay here. Wait for me. Go, I urged him. Be safe. He gave me one last, burning look. He turned and ran out the heavy oak door. His footsteps echoed down the stone corridor. He left his heavy cloak draped over the chair. I leaned against the table. My legs felt weak. I touched my fingertips to my lips. They were tingling. He almost kissed me. The brooding, handsome guard wanted me. He wanted the soft, heavy Omega everyone else threw away. A brilliant, dizzying joy bloomed in my chest. I walked over to the wooden chair near the dying hearth. I reached for his heavy leather cloak. Then I saw it. When he leaned over me, the heavy gold chain slipped from his open collar. It must have snagged on the thick iron buckle of my apron. In his violent, panicked rush to answer the bells, he hadn't felt the link's snap. The chain lay abandoned on the stone floor like a dead snake. A heavy gold ring dangled from the broken end. I knelt down. I picked the metal up. I held it to the firelight. My blood turned to absolute ice. It was a signet ring. The crest was unmistakable. A dragon coiled around a fractured sword. It was the imperial seal. It was the ring used to sign royal decrees. It was the ring used to order executions. It was the ring used to seal proxy marriages. It belonged to Emperor Valerim. I stared at the gold band. The room started to spin. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with sickening force. The unshakable confidence. The complete lack of fear when insulting the crown. The thick, overwhelmingly powerful alpha scent. Val was Valerim. The guard was the Emperor. The dizzying joy in my chest rotted instantly. It turned into a heavy, suffocating weight. My scent plummeted. The warm hazelnut vanished. The air filled with the sharp, acidic smell of burnt flour and pure distress. Why would he do this? The answer felt obvious. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut. He was mocking me. The rival faction sent him a fat, pathetic joke of a husband. He exiled me to the spire, but he wanted to see the joke for himself. He dressed up as a lowly guard. He came down here to laugh at me. He watched me cook for him. He watched me bear my insecurities. He watched me fall desperately, pathetically in love with a man who didn't exist. He almost kissed me. Was it a dare? Was it just a cruel game to see how easily the desperate Omega would surrender? You stupid, gullible fool, I whispered to the empty room. Hot, angry tears spilled down my cheeks. My chest heaved. The betrayal was absolute. It ripped through my newly found confidence, tore it to shreds. I was right all along. No alpha would ever truly want me. It was all a twisted lie. I dropped the signet ring on the stone floor. It rang out like a death knell. I moved mechanically. I walked to the heavy oak doors of the kitchen. I grabbed the thick iron bolts. I slammed them shut. The locks engaged with a heavy, final sound. But it wasn't enough. I needed more. I walked to the heavy wooden prep table. I put my soft, broad shoulders against the wood. I dug my boots into the stone. I pushed with all my strength. The table screamed across the floor. I shoved it flush against the locked doors. I barricaded the room. I slid down the wood. I pulled my knees to my chest. I buried my face in my arms. I let the tears fall freely. The storm raged outside. The fire died in the hearth. I was entirely alone again. I would never let him in. I would never let the Emperor humiliate me again. Chapter 6. Iron Grates and Shattered Scales. I sat on the cold stone floor all night. I didn't sleep. My eyes were swollen and red. My chest physically ached. The kitchen fire burned down to gray ash. The winter spire felt like a tomb again. I stared at the heavy oak doors. The thick wooden prep table remained wedged against them. I was safe. I was isolated. I was utterly miserable. My scent was a disaster. It smelled like burnt sugar and sour milk. It was the scent of a broken heart. Morning light eventually crept through the narrow windows. It offered no warmth. Then I heard it. Heavy, frantic footsteps echoed in the stone corridor. Arthur, his voice was raw, tore through the heavy wood. He pounded his fists against the oak doors. The iron hinges rattled. The prep table groaned under the force. Arthur, please. Open the door. I squeezed my eyes shut, covered my ears. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear the Emperor's lies. I know you are in there. His voice cracked. He sounded completely desperate. You're sent. I can smell your distress. Please, let me explain. I stood up. My legs were stiff. I grabbed the dropped ring from the stone floor. I walked slowly toward the door. There was a small, barred iron grate at eye level. I slid the metal cover back. Veilrim stood on the other side. He looked terrible. He was still wearing his damp linen shirt. His dark hair was a mess. His eyes were wide and panicked. The jagged scar on his brow stood out starkly against his pale skin. Arthur, he breathed. He gripped the iron bars of the grate. His knuckles turned white. I held up my hand. I pinched the heavy gold signet ring between my fingers. I held it up to the grate. Veilrim stared at the imperial seal. He stopped breathing. You left this, I said. My voice was completely hollow. Your Majesty. He flinched. The title hit him like a physical blow. The bells were a distraction, he rushed out. His voice was frantic. The hostile nobles set a fire in the outer armory. I spent the entire night locked in the war room, managing the crisis and securing the perimeter. I came back the second it was handled. Arthur, listen to me. I did not mean to deceive you. Not like this. Did you enjoy it? I asked. A hot tear slipped down my cheek, but my voice was like ice. Did you enjoy watching me scramble to please a man who didn't exist? I was a sous chef, Veilrim. I know when someone is trying to send back a dish they already ate. You sat at my table, took everything I gave you, and held a hidden tally the whole time. You even fed me imperial military secrets just to see if I was gullible enough to believe a common guard knew them. Was it a good laugh?
No.
Veilrim shouted. He pressed his face against the iron bars. His dark eyes were swimming with tears. It was never a game. I swear it. I was terrified. I let out a bitter laugh. You are the Alpha Emperor. You fear nothing. I feared you. He gripped the bars harder. The metal groaned. The court sent you as a political insult. I exiled you because I was a coward. I was angry, but my beast smelled your cooking from the courtyard. I came down as a guard to see who was making the spire smell like an actual home. I met you. I ate your food. He swallowed hard. His chest heaved. The heavy scent of wood smoke and black pepper poured through the grate. It was laced with absolute panic. You were so brilliant, Veilrim whispered. His voice broke completely. You were so strong. You survived everything I threw at you. When I saw what you were doing, I secretly ordered the quartermaster to blindly accept any pathetic trade Elias offered. I fell in love with you. But you hated the Emperor. You told me you hated him. How could I confess? How could I tell you I was the monster who locked you away? My breath caught in my throat. I looked into his eyes. I searched for a lie. I only found naked, bleeding honesty. He loved me. The Emperor actually loved me. I stepped closer to the heavy door. The wood pressed against my chest. Veilrim let out a shaky breath. He reached his fingers through the narrow gaps in the iron grate. He touched my face. His callous thumb wiped away my tears. The touch was incredibly gentle. My Omega instincts surged. I leaned into his hand. I couldn't stop myself. "I love you, Arthur," he murmured. "Only you." I closed my eyes. I tilted my head forward. I pressed my face against the cold iron bars. Veilrim leaned in. He pressed his lips against mine through the grate. It was a desperate, messy kiss. The iron bars pressed sharply into our faces. The kiss tasted like salt and tears. It was an explosion of heat and raw emotion. He kissed me like he was drowning. Kissed him back. My hands gripped the iron bars. I wanted to break the door down. I wanted to feel his heavy arms around my waist. For a few seconds, the world stopped. There was only his mouth. There was only his warm, frantic breath. But then, the reality of the situation crashed back down. He lied for weeks. He let me hate myself. He let me feel worthless. One kiss couldn't erase the deep wounds of his deception. I broke the kiss. I pulled back. I gasped for air. Veilrim chased my lips. He hit the iron bars. "Arthur, please." "I can't," I whispered. I stepped away from the door. I wrapped my arms around my heavy stomach. "I need time. You broke my trust. You broke my heart. Don't turn away," Veilrim begged. His voice shifted. It deepened unnaturally. "Arthur, please. If you reject me, I cannot hold it. Leave me alone," I sobbed. I turned my back on the door. A terrifying sound echoed in the stone corridor. It was a roar. It wasn't human. Veilrim screamed. The sound was pure, physical agony. I spun around. Through the grate, I saw him drop to his knees. He clutched his head. The air around him shimmered with dark, violent energy. His bones cracked loudly. The sound echoed like snapping timber. "Val?" I yelled. I rushed back to the grate. He looked up at me. His dark eyes flashed a brilliant, glowing red. "Run!" he gasped out. His body expanded violently. Dark, midnight scales ripped through his linen shirt. His jaw extended into a jagged snout. The stone walls cracked under his sudden, massive weight. I didn't know it then, but the ancient blood curse usually forced the change at midnight. Veilrim possessed iron control. But my absolute rejection shattered that restraint. The beast was breaking free in the middle of the day, and the sun wouldn't stop it this time. I watched in absolute horror. The guard I loved was disappearing. The massive shadow dragon took his place. The monster shattered the corridor walls. It burst out of the winter spire. It spilled into the snowy courtyard. The sunlight hit its dark scales. The dragon roared at the sky. It was a sound of absolute despair. My hands shook uncontrollably. The puzzle was finally complete. The scarred guard, the Alpha Emperor, the starving midnight beast. They were all the same man, and I had just broken his heart. I stared at the heavy wooden table blocking the door. I had a choice to make: hide in my kitchen or step out and face the monster I loved. Chapter 7: Bare Hands and Midnight Scales. The roar shook the dust from the ceiling. I stood completely frozen. My chest physically ached. The man I loved was a monster. The man I hated was the man I loved. It was a tangled, miserable mess, but he was in agonizing pain. I could feel it. My Omega instincts screamed at me to help my Alpha. I wiped the tears from my face. I looked at the heavy prep table. I had barricaded myself inside. I wanted to be safe, but safety felt remarkably like a tomb. I placed my hands flat on the thick wood. I braced my boots against the stone floor. I pushed. My muscles burned. The table scraped loudly across the floor. I threw the iron bolts back. I ripped the oak doors open. Cold wind rushed inside, carried the bitter, sharp smell of ash. It smelled like pure panic. I ran down the broken corridor. I burst out into the courtyard. The sight was absolutely terrifying. The dragon was massive. Its midnight scales gleamed in the harsh daylight. It thrashed blindly in the deep snow. Its heavy tail smashed a stone statue into powder, clawed at the frozen earth. It was completely wild. It was drowning in an ocean of self-hatred. Outer garrison guards poured into the courtyard. The elite inner circle usually kept them far away from the spire at night, but the daytime breach drew everyone in. They wore heavy armor. They drew their steel swords. They raised heavy crossbows. "The shadow beast of the north," a captain shouted. His voice was thick with terror. "The old legends are true. It's real. It breached the spire." Another soldier screamed. "The exiled consort is inside. Protect the main keep before it turns on the palace." My heart stopped. They didn't know. They had no idea the monster was their emperor. They were going to kill him. "Stop!" I screamed. My voice cracked. No one heard me over the chaos. The dragon let out another deafening roar. It snapped its jaws at the approaching soldiers. I had to do this myself. I had no spiced mutton. I had no sweet apple tarts. I only had my heavy, soft body. I only had my truth. I stepped out into the deep snow. The cold bit through my thin linen trousers. I didn't care. I forced my panicked Omega instincts to shut up. I'd handled grease fires and screaming head chefs. This was just another high-pressure service. I pushed past the terror. I didn't have a meat cleaver, but I had a scent that could settle a riot. I closed my eyes for a split second. I released my scent completely. I pushed it out into the freezing air. Warm, roasted hazelnuts. Sweet brown sugar. Rich, melted butter. A beacon of absolute comfort. The dragon froze. Its massive tail knocked over a stone pillar. It whipped its huge, terrifying head around. Glowing red eyes locked directly onto me. Smoke billowed from its jagged jaws. It let out a loud, rattling sound. It vibrated in my teeth. The beast took a heavy step toward me. "Fire!" the captain yelled. "Do not shoot!" I bellowed with my full chest. I ran forward. I put myself directly between the crossbows and the beast. I spread my arms wide. The guards hesitated. They recognized me. I was the exiled consort. I was the joke of the court. But right now, I was standing between them and certain death. I turned my back to the soldiers. I faced the dragon. I started walking forward. One slow, deliberate step at a time. The beast lowered its massive head. It bared teeth the size of swords. It looked completely untamed. The ancient curse was fighting for control. It wanted to drive him mad. "Val," I said. My voice was soft but steady. "Valrim, look at me." The beast snapped its jaws. It blew a harsh puff of dark smoke. It warned me to stay back. I didn't stop. I closed the distance. The heat rolling off its dark scales was intense. It felt like standing next to a blazing hearth. "You are not a monster," I whispered. I stood right in front of that jagged snout. It smelled like a burnt-out stove. "You're just a man who's been overcooked by a bad curse, and I don't let good things go to waste. You're mine, Valrim. Deal with it." I reached my hand up. My plump fingers trembled slightly. I didn't hold a peace offering of food. I held nothing but pure, unconditional trust. I pressed my bare palm flat against the dark scales of his snout. The dragon flinched hard. Then the ancient curse fought back. The beast ripped its head away. It roared directly in my face. The sheer force knocked me backward. I landed hard in the deep snow. The dragon raised its massive front claws, prepared to strike the ground right where I lay. The guards screamed. My heart pounded wildly. I refused to run. I scrambled right back to my feet. I pushed my scent out even harder. I flooded the entire courtyard with warm hazelnuts and sweet sugar. I stepped right back into its striking distance. "No!" I shouted. I reached up. I grabbed its heavy, sharp jaw with both hands. I dug my boots into the ice. "Fight it, Valrim. You are stronger than this curse." The dragon froze mid-strike. It let out a sharp, rattling gasp. I didn't pull away. I stroked the rough, midnight scales. I poured every ounce of my love into that simple touch. I forgave the lies. I forgave the proxy wedding. I forgave the winter spire. I just wanted my alpha back. "Come back to me," I pleaded softly. I leaned forward. I pressed my forehead against the dragon's massive nose. The bitter ash scent instantly dissolved. A thick, Overwhelming wave of wood smoke and black pepper washed over us. It was Veilrim. He was still in there. The curse was finally breaking. The dragon closed its glowing eyes. A deep, chest-rattling rumble shook the snowy ground. Dark magic shimmered in the air. The massive scales began to shrink. The beastly form collapsed inward. A bright, blinding light flashed across the courtyard. I squeezed my eyes shut. Then the heavy weight of a man fell forward. Caught him. My wide hips and sturdy legs braced us. Veilrim collapsed heavily into my arms. He was completely bare. He was freezing and trembling violently. I didn't care who was watching. I pulled off my heavy linen overshirt. I draped it over his broad, scarred shoulders. I wrapped my arms tightly around him. I buried my face in his dark hair. "Arthur," he sobbed into my neck. He clung to my thick waist like a lifeline. His large hands gripped my soft back. "You stayed. You touched me. You didn't run." "I am right here," I promised. I scented his neck eagerly. I marked his pulse point with my hazelnut sweetness. I claimed him in front of everyone. "I've got you, Val. You are safe." Around us, the courtyard was dead silent. The wind howled through the broken stone. The garrison guards dropped their weapons in sheer shock. They stared with wide eyes. The terrifying, cursed emperor was completely cured. And the discarded, overweight Omega was the only one holding his heart. Chapter 8: Warm Brioche and Imperial Decrees. He looked up at me. His dark eyes were entirely human. They brimmed with tears. "You broke it," he whispered. His voice was rough. "The curse is gone. You are safe," I promised. I cupped his cold cheeks. My thumbs traced the jagged scar on his brow. He leaned into my touch. He stood up slowly. He kept one heavy arm wrapped tightly around my thick waist. He pulled me flush against his side. The wood smoke and black pepper scent washed over me. It was pure, unbridled alpha devotion. He didn't care who was watching. He cupped the back of my neck. He pulled my face to his. He kissed me. It wasn't like the desperate clash through the iron grate. This kiss was deep. It was reverent. It was a solid promise. His lips moved slowly against mine. He tasted like snow and relief. My inner Omega melted completely. I opened my mouth for him. Our scents tangled together in the freezing air. Roasted hazelnuts and warm wood smoke. Perfect, permanent bond. We finally pulled apart. We were both breathless. The captain of the guard stepped forward. He dropped to one knee in the snow. "Your Majesty." Soon, the entire courtyard was kneeling. Veilrim turned to face them. He kept me tucked securely against his side. His exhaustion was gone. He radiated absolute, terrifying authority. "The lies that have rotted this court are over," Veilrim declared. His voice echoed off the stone walls. He looked at the guards, who were still trembling. "The fever was a mask. The shadow beast you saw was the curse I carried. But today the beast is dead. My true mate has anchored my soul." He looked directly at a group of shivering, terrified nobles. They had rushed out from the main hall. They were the ones who sent me here. They were the ones who called me a pig. "Arthur is your emperor consort," Veilrim snarled. He looked at the horizon, where the smoke of the northern campfires was finally visible. "My legions didn't come here to kill a dragon. They came to restore a king. When the beast broke free, my loyal generals saw their chance. They used the chaos in the courtyard to secure the throne room. I used my night patrols at the spire to hold secret war councils with my spies. Your rebellion ended the second you lost control of the castle." The nobles bowed their heads instantly. The political game was over. Veilrim had his power back. And he had me. 6 months passed. The Winter Spire was unrecognizable. It was no longer a cold, forgotten prison. We tore down the barricades. We brought in massive brick ovens. But my pride was the glass house. We'd cleared the rot and replaced the shattered panes. It wasn't an overgrown jungle anymore. It was a sprawling imperial garden that fed the entire spire. My secret pantry had become the heart of the castle's kitchen. I stood at the wide prep table. The afternoon sun streamed through the clean glass windows.
Ibura aprope, tailurad linen tunic.
fit my broad shoulders perfectly. It draped nicely over my soft stomach. I wasn't hiding my body anymore. I was proud of it. I was kneading a rich brioche dough. My hands were covered in flour. Heavy boots sounded in the doorway. My heart still did a happy little jump. Veilrim walked in. He wore his dark royal leathers. He looked magnificent. The deep shadows were gone from his eyes. He smiled the moment he saw me. "Smells like heaven in here," he said. He walked up behind me. He wrapped his large, strong arms around my waist. He pulled my back flush against his broad chest. He buried his face in my neck. He took a deep breath. A low, happy rumble vibrated in his throat. "You smell better than the bread," he murmured. He pressed a soft, lingering kiss to my scent gland. I shivered. A warm flush spread across my cheeks. "Val, I am covered in flour." "I don't care," he growled playfully. His hands smoothed over my stomach. He traced the wide curve of my hips. There was no hesitation in his touch. He worshipped every soft inch of me. He made me feel incredibly desired. The old insecurities were entirely gone. He spun me around in his arms. I laughed. I held my floury hands up to avoid ruining his clothes. He didn't care about the mess. He backed me up against the wooden table. He slotted his hips perfectly between my thick thighs. He looked down at me with burning, affectionate eyes. "I missed you today," he said softly. "You were only in council for 3 hours," I teased. 3 hours too long." He leaned down. He captured my lips in a slow, passionate kiss. His tongue swept gently into my mouth. He tasted like hot tea and mint. I let out a soft sigh. I wrapped my arms around his neck. Flower be damned. My fingers tangled in his dark hair. The kiss deepened. It was hot and entirely consuming. His hands gripped my waist securely. He squeezed my soft hips. He made a low sound in the back of his throat. Sent a thrill straight to my core. We broke apart reluctantly. Our foreheads rested together. We were both breathing a little heavier. "The council is dismissed for the day," Veilrim whispered against my lips. "The Emperor requires his consort's immediate attention." I smiled. I brushed a stray lock of hair from his scarred brow. "Let me put the dough in to rise," I said. "Then I am all yours." Veilrim grinned. It was a bright, beautiful sight. He kissed the tip of my nose. I turned back to the dough. I felt completely safe. I was the chef supreme of the Winter Spire. I was the true mate to the Alpha Emperor. Not bad for a guy who died on a wet floor in a studio apartment. We conquered the curse. We conquered the court. And I finally had a kitchen that didn't leak. And we had a lifetime of sweet, warm days ahead of us.
Writing this ending meant everything to me, honestly, because the climax doesn't hinge on some explosive magic battle. It hinges on something so much harder than that: raw vulnerability. Veilrim spent his entire life hiding the beast inside him. He genuinely believed in his bones that he was unlovable, and Arthur didn't fight that belief or argue with it. He just looked at the darkest part of the Emperor and offered comfort. That was it. That was enough. Arthur's journey is my favorite thing I've ever written, I think. He never had to shrink himself, change himself, or prove himself worthy of love. He just had to believe he already was. And he built that belief slowly, quietly, one meal at a time, alone in a freezing room. There's something about that image that gets me every time, because healing rarely looks the way we expect it to. It's not always a breakthrough moment or a grand battle one. Sometimes it's just a warm bowl of soup. Sometimes it's simply deciding one more time to survive the cold. I really hope the story found you at the right moment. If it did, if you needed it today, that means the world to me. If you want to spend more time in worlds like this one, I do have full audiobooks available in my shop, and I'd love for you to check them out. Thank you so much for being here and for listening. I'll see you in the next one.